Welcome back to Redefining Love. I am your host, Tara Portelli, and today we are going to get into a very interesting conversation. I know so many of you are curious about these non-monogamous relationships. As traditional relationships seem to be falling apart, infidelity is higher than ever with the age of social media and online dating. I think that a lot of people are questioning, is it possible to be in a healthy monogamous relationship? And my guest today is someone who has always explored non-monogamy as her go-to. She is married and she has a husband, and together they explore different relationships with other people. And for some people, this feels really uncomfortable, and myself included. And in a very beautiful, healthy, challenging conversation, we explore these types of relationships, if they're sustainable or if they are a way of avoiding deep intimacy. In this very raw conversation with Candace Sojourn, she is a lawyer, an entrepreneur, and a transformational leader. In her work, bridges finance, technology, and now human development. She is the author of a book called Typhoon Honey, The Only Way Out is Through. This is a conversation that is anything but surface level. I mean, it doesn't matter what side of the coin that you fall on. This conversation is going to make you think twice about all sides of relationships, about understanding why people choose to be in open relationships, and how that can work in a family dynamic. So please help me welcome my guest, Candace Sojourn. Welcome to the podcast, Candace. It is really amazing to have you here. You have such an incredible, interesting journey that you've had in your life, and I'm really excited to dive in. And I want to start off the conversation by talking about what was the situation in your life that really made you start to redefine yourself and connect with your truth.
It's such a great question, and I'm so excited to be on your podcast talking about self-love. I think this is such an important topic, and so thank you for having me. As I look back on my turning point moment in life, it was you've interviewed quite a few people with similar stories, but I had a rock bottom. My rock bottom was I was an entrepreneur. I had raised venture capital. I had went and changed a federal law when I was 28 years old. I was on the cover of the New York Times as a 28-year-old entrepreneur, and then I was sued for fraud. My state regulators claimed that I had tricked my investors into investing in an illegal company. Now, while I wasn't guilty of that, and that was ultimately exonerated, I was unemployable for some period of time. I lost the business. I lost my reputation. I went to Nepal and went off the grid for a few months because I had no idea what to do with my life. And while I was in meditation school, I was summoned to San Diego. I had been living in New York at the time. And so I literally had no job, no plan, no place to live, and $37 in my checking account. I was at my rock bottom. And while I wasn't guilty of, the fraud that I was being accused of, I did realize that I was living many aspects of my life out of integrity. And one of those was the way that I was relating with people romantically. I had childhood trauma. And so as a result of that, I cheated on every boyfriend I ever had. And I was a perpetual cheater. And so when after meditation school, when I went to San Diego, I was like, I'm not going to be this way anymore. I'm going to live a life of honesty and integrity. And my self-love journey started by allowing myself to find the open relating community, which would allow me to be honest and integrous, and be living my truth.
Wow. It's so interesting when you hear about a rock bottom and how it can become the biggest catalyst in your life, right? So in the moment, you're like, why is this happening to me? And you just feel like everything is falling apart. But we never know what's on the other side of that journey, because it's just, it brings us to our knees where we have no choice but to pick up the pieces we think we have everything figured out, but the truth is that, there's so much more for us in life than we even realize. And I think, being shown through your journey that you needed to start to come clean with yourself uh,
Hmm.
is amazing and beautiful. And I'm so curious. Tell me about what was it like to go from New York City to Nepal meditating every day? Like that must have been a culture shock.
It was more of like I was living a very, very fast pace. I mean, I was in my late 20s, living a very fast pace, working 18-hour days. And then I just got smacked in the face with this investigation, if you will. The first thing I did, honestly, was I went to Nicaragua and I planned to commit suicide. This was 2013. And I was like, I don't have a path forward. My own parents asked if I was a thief. It was one of those things where I just didn't feel like anyone got me and anyone was on my side. And a friend of mine owned a trekking company in Nepal and said, it might be a good idea for you just to go off the grid for a little while. And I'm so grateful. David is a friend of mine who did this, and I'm so grateful to him for recommending it. And so I went and wrote marketing materials for him for his trekking company, and like went trekking in the Himalayas and went to meditation school. And it was exactly what I needed. It was just like no one knew who I was. I had no identity, and I was able to kind of start from a clean page, a blank slate. It was less of a culture shock and more of just exactly the medicine that my heart needed at the time.
Wow. And so was there like one moment that you had while you were there that was like, I've been living a lie and like I haven't been true to myself?
It was more when I was in meditation school. You spend a lot of time in silence, and so while I was there, I was just like, let's do an inventory. Let's do an inventory of every aspect of my life. So financial, professional, sexual, family, like all of the aspects of my life, and where am I not in integrity? Where am I not living honestly or authentically? There were a few places, honestly, but the biggest one for me was in my intimate relationships. I just could not um, live honestly. I like was constantly telling tall tales, and I just had an issue there, right? And so while I wasn't guilty in business, I was like, this is a real opportunity for me to take a hard look at every aspect of life. And my romantic relationships showed up the loudest.
Interesting. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that can probably relate to that, because a lot of people
Hmm.
have a hard time just being faithful in relationships for whatever reason, whether it's trauma or, maybe just needing like that, what do you call it? Like validation from other people.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you're
Hmm.
in a relationship for a long time, you're like, do I still got it going on? And, like
Hmm.
you just need to hear it from someone else or just feel it from somebody else. So can I ask you like a little bit more about that? And like what exactly did you realize about yourself that you were like why were you a perpetual cheater? Like what came up for you?
Yeah. So, when I was 20 years old, I came to the realization that I'd been the recipient of sexual trauma as a child, and from someone close to me. And so when I came to the adults in my life at that time and said, "Hey, this happened to me as a kid," the adults that I came to said, "You're making it up." And so I couldn't make sense of whether I was making it up or it really happened, and it was just a really hard thing to navigate through. And so then, because I didn't know if I was making it up or not, I just started. I was in a kind of a self-loathing shame spiral around sexuality and sexual identities. That was one thing. And I just started telling tall tales because it didn't seem like the truth was good enough. The truth wasn't enough to get love, and so I had to be something else or had to be bigger. It was kind of a big fish thing, syndrome. And so two things happened at the same time. I became much more promiscuous, and I also started telling tall tales, and just like kind of maneuvering the truth because I didn't think the truth was actually good enough. So that all started when I was around 20 years old.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's really common. I think
Hmm.
I hear it a lot unfortunately when someone like a kid is been abused and they're told that that's not possible or like, they don't
Hmm.
feel safe to share openly about what they've been going through. I've heard it
Hmm.
so many times. And so I'm really first of all, I want to like I'm sorry that you had to to go through that, and that you weren't, they didn't believe you, because that really shapes, obviously, now you in your adulthood trying to navigate intimate relationships, because intimacy for you doesn't feel safe. You know?
Yeah. It's interesting. Thank you for that. It was one thing to navigate that myself as an adult. It was another thing when I became a mom and when I had my own child. And so, when that happened, I thought, okay, my adults in my life did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. And when I have children, I am committed to them having a different experience as they grow up, to where they're embraced for whatever they bring to me or to the other adults in their life, that there is a culture that supports them, and that, for whatever experiences come to them in life, and that they're fully supported.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's amazing that you're committed to that now, and you're open about now your realization around your sexuality. So I kind of want to get into
Hmm.
that. So you wrote a book called Polyagony, and I'm just
Yes.
so curious about the title, because when I read that, or when I think about it, I'm like, okay, like polyagony, like the first thing that came to my mind is like, this doesn't feel good to be like considering like a polyamorous relationship. It's agony. So can you share a little bit more about the title, and why you decided to name your book that?
Yeah. So first, the title is meant for people who have considered opening their relationship. So 70% of adults in the United States have cheated at some point. Cheating is a very, very common mistake that we all make. And 20% now of American adults identify or have identified at some point in their life as non-monogamous. And so there's a large subculture here, a large population of people who are opening up their relationships with very few tools on how to do it successfully. So there's a very small population of poly-informed therapists. There are like 4 books out there on the topic. And so one of the things that, as I have interviewed hundreds of families in this space over the years, I keep hearing over and over again, I just wish somebody would write the bloopers. I wish somebody would just talk about the mistakes that we made when we tried this, when we tried opening up our marriage, or when we tried talking about it with our kids, or when we tried bringing someone new into our family, or any of these scenarios. It'd be so great if somebody could just talk about the honest mistakes and what we can do about it. And so that's the point behind polyagony. It's meant to be a bit of a play on words, but there are a lot of mistakes that people make, and we just haven't been normalizing a conversation around them. So this book is attempting to create a normalized conversation.
Wow. So what would you say is like the top maybe few mistakes that someone would make, deciding to open up their relationship and going down this road?
There are a few. And that they're in categories. So first, a lot of adults make mistakes in just their intention setting. Like, why am I doing this in the first place? And oftentimes it's like because my partner's asking me to, or because I don't feel like I can find someone. So let me just go out and like be casual. So there's a lot of mistakes around like why? Why am I doing this? The second category is around agreements. So, like, how do I talk about this with my partner? How do we set agreements that feel good to both of us and set agreements that we won't break? So that's another category. The third is around like how do we interact with the third party? Like, how do I go on a date with another person? How do I socialize that with my existing partner? How do we manage jealousy and FOMO? And so there's a whole category of mistakes around that. There's a category of mistakes around coming out of the closet. So, how do I come out to my kids, to my coworkers, to my adult family members? Do I come out at all? And if not, like, what are the pros and cons of that? And then finally, there's navigating the relationship. How do I manage arguments? How do I manage breakups? How do I manage the evolution of my relationship? And how is that different than if I was in a monogamous relationship? So there's a few categories of mistakes that adults run into.
Interesting. So with your situation, you are married and you have been this entire time. And was
Mhm.
this a mutual conversation about opening up your relationship, or was this something specifically that you decided to do? And how did your husband react?
So we were a little bit different because when we met 11 years ago, I was already polyamorous. So I had been polyamorous for years before meeting my husband. We met at a retreat called Intimacy Fest, which was, we learned after we got there that it was an open relating type of retreat. And so we were given tools from day one, on how to talk about these things, on how to have awkward conversations, on how to talk about our desires. We went to a workshop essentially for that, and that's how we met. The good news in that is that my husband and I, from the day we met, he knew who I was, and so there was never like we had to rewrite something because from the very first interaction we were openly relating.
And he was already like, was he open as well, or was this new to him and he was open to exploring it?
He had been, and I don't want to speak too much to his experiences since he's not on the call, but he had only ever been monogamous when he met me. And
Okay.
so it was definitely relearning. But we were walking into it with our eyes wide open.
Okay. And was, I'm assuming there was a lot of challenges based on like what you shared a little bit in your book and like the bloopers and the experiences.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
Yeah, so what I would say is this: rather than speaking to my own experience, because I had interviewed 100 couples, families, there are some themes, and so some of the themes that come out are what happens when we want different things. So often, in fact, in more cases than not, if there's a couple, one member of the couple wants something very different than the other. One's an introvert, one's an extrovert. One is very like flamboyant and wants to be out and social, and one is very private and wants to keep things confidential. One wants to share with kids, one doesn't, right? So that there's a number of examples of where just the couple is just in two different places, and how to navigate that in a way that feels good to both parties.
So in your interviewing then, and
Hmm.
have been people been able to navigate this successfully? Is this like,
Yes.
yeah, okay, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that, of the 100 families, 60 to 65 of them have navigated successfully. And I think the individuals and couples who've navigated open relating successfully did so with a lot of practice and communication. So they did things like have weekly check-ins. So they had a constant check-in on like, how are we doing? Is there anything we need to talk through? Is there anything that's crunchy between us? Do we need to navigate something? Many of them had poly-informed therapists, who could help them navigate things like jealousies and insecurities. They had a North Star, something that they felt was a joint purpose in their relationship. So, whether that is raising a child or running a business together, but there was a North Star, like we are aligned in all of these other aspects of our life, and so that it's worth it to figure out how to co-create. And honestly, that's kind of the point of the book: is that it doesn't have to be polyagony. You can do this in a way that feels aligned with your values and that feels really nourishing for your relationship. It just requires intention and communication.
Okay. So when you think about it from the lens of, polyamory versus monogamy, like what are your views on monogamous relationships and like when you compare the two?
I'm a big supporter of monogamous relationships when the couple consciously chooses into that. I think too often we as adults just do what we were encultured to do. We live a life that we were told we are supposed to be living. And so that could be the job that we have. We were told we had to have a white collar job. We had to make, six figures or something like that. It could be the relationships that we're in. It could be the way that we choose, where we choose to live. And so I'm just a big believer of choose into it. Like know what your options are and choose into it. And if an individual or a couple choose into monogamy, that's amazing. It's beautiful. And I think that it's sacred, and it's so good for so many people. And it's not the only way. And I'm a big supporter of LGBTQ. I'm a big supporter of getting clear on one's identity and knowing like who you are, knowing what turns you on, knowing how you want to connect with other people, and then building a life around that based on what you're choosing into.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer, and I appreciate your response. And so I'm thinking of it from the lens of, you know, you came from a traumatic experience as a child, and
Mhm.
your way of navigating that trauma was by being unfaithful because you didn't
Mhm.
heal that. So
Mhm.
now, would you say like that? Where do you draw the line between avoidance versus actually facing things and maybe healing that and going deeper in your own relationship with the one person?
So I think it's very important that anytime someone has experienced trauma, that they first have a relationship with themselves. And even in my book, I spend the first two chapters on what is your relationship with yourself? Do you have a trust relationship with yourself? Do you love yourself? Are you able to give yourself personal affirmations? Like, have you healed have you done your inner child work? Have you gone to all of your parts and spent some time with the parts that need your support, that need to be heard? So I don't think anyone should do this lightly. I think every adult, as they're thinking about how they're going to relate, with others, needs to first do their inner work. And I did do my inner work as well. I think then it's a matter of, do I want to have an experiment? Like, is this something that I want to try on? So a lot of people will choose non-monogamy for some period of time as an experiment, like, and in the book, in Polyagony, I talk about lifestyle versus identity. And so many people are saying, oh, it's a lifestyle choice. I could take it or leave it. I'll try it on for a year or two. And if it fits, great. And if not, that's fine too. Or if I meet a partner who wants to be monogamous, I could easily be monogamous. And so that is someone who's choosing non-monogamy as a lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful, and that I think you need to be clear about that's what you're doing. But there's a whole different population of adults who choose polyamory as an identity. It is part of who they are as a being. Just as if so I am a bisexual, queer, polyamorous woman. All four of those words have deep meaning for me. And so, I find beauty in a lot of different styles of relating. And I actually have tried monogamy, and made conscious choices to try monogamy for periods of time, and then determined with my partners at the time, and whoever that was, that's not who I am. It's just not who I am. The way that I choose to live my life and relate is one that is abundant. I love, and it doesn't mean that I am irresponsible, but it means that I love. And I also don't believe that for me, one person can fulfill all of my needs. I've been through several miscarriages. We've had a child that we lost after a few days of life, and so like real traumatic situations. And to expect that one person can be your rock, the shoulder to cry on, like the person that you commiserate with, that's just really hard. That's hard on that one person and hard on me. And so I'm a believer that, like, I can lean on several people for different aspects of what I need in life, and several people are also able to lean on me.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that for sure.
Hmm.
And, I'm going to be authentic to myself where I do like this topic is uncomfortable for me personally.
Hmm.
It's not to
Hmm.
say that someone else can't choose it for themselves. And
Sure.
everyone gets to choose what feels right for them and what feels aligned for them. But one thing that came to my mind when you were just sharing that, how do you personally cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself without losing yourself and outsourcing love or looking for love to from others, multiple people to feel love inside of you? Like, how do you deepen that relationship with you and stay true to yourself? Because I mean, it is difficult to manage one relationship, but never mind multiple relationships.
I'm going to back up on that question, and I'm just going to speak into how, so my co-author of the first book that I wrote was called Typhoon Honey: The Only Way Out Is Through, and that book was based on, like, your biggest opportunities for growth lie in the things that scare you the most. So go for it, go for the scary things, and there's so much growth on the other side. my co-author for that book was a clinical psychologist by the name of Chris Gorell. And I went to him when I wrote Polyagony and asked him, like, hey, will you read this? And how do you think about this? And he said, honestly, the way that I'm reading your book, I think I'm polyamorous. And he said, while I'm only in one romantic relationship with my wife, I have several kids. And every time I had a child, my love expanded. So, I didn't have just, I don't have 100 units of love that I have to share between my wife and my three kids. Every time I had a child, my heart expanded to completely love that child. And so rather than seeing this as something salacious, or let's just like take sexuality out of it for a moment, and just the ability to love, to fully love more than one person. Anyone who has been married with children has already experienced that. And it's not that I as a mother am incomplete, that I'm seeking love from my husband and my children, right? I have so much love to give because I am just consumed with love for these people. It's very similar if you think about expanding your family in non-traditional ways. It's just that it's not 100 units of love that have to be shared among people. It's, I have love that continues to expand as my family expands.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful answer, and thank you for explaining it like that because
Yeah,
I
of
relate
course.
very much so to that understanding. And
Hmm.
um, when you do go into these types of relationships, obviously, it's going to play on your insecurities. I mean, I feel like that's unavoidable. So, can you speak
Hmm.
to that and like, have you been able to overcome that piece and like navigate it?
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things I'm the most grateful for, is that I like this way of relating, open relating, requires a lot of conversation and a lot of introspection. It requires you to come up face to face with your fears and your insecurities on a pretty consistent basis. And those insecurities are often around jealousy, am I enough, lack of worthiness. Like there a lot of that will come up. And what's amazing is I have processed more of this with my life partner than I ever would have had we not chosen this path. Like, we are constantly in a conversation around what we need from one another, how we're feeling about different scenarios. We've processed more than most couples do in 50 years, and so as a result of that, we've been able to manage the death of a child, some really traumatic scenarios in our family, because we've just processed so much together. Um, so, but with insecurities, when you choose to open up your relationship, one of the things, let's just say first we're in a monogamous relationship. So you've been married for a while, for several years, and what you've built over the years is secure attachment. So you've now left your parents and now you've moved into a relationship with a new human in a marriage or a family structure, and you've built secure attachments. Now you can trust each other. You don't have to be anxious every time they leave the house. You know they're going to come back home, right? So that there's a secure attachment that's built with that person. Anytime you attempt to build a relationship with yet another person, you have to go through that whole process again of building secure attachment, not just with the new person, but also with your existing partner. So insecurities pop up because secure attachment hasn't been built. And so it's kind of like you have to go through the whole relationship evolution more than one time. And that's when you said it's hard enough with one relationship, right? Well, because you built that over years, and that trust took time. And so as you think about adding more people into your life, you have to think about that whole process of trust building that over and over again. Now, the good news is you get really good at it. You get a lot better at it, and you become more efficient at it over time. But it's still a process that's required in every relationship.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. And like, it's interesting because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, I really believe in the power of focus. So like when you're
Hmm.
in one relationship and you can really just dive into the depths of that, but what you're sharing, if I can reflect back and to see if it's accurate, is that actually by opening up the relationship, it actually forces these deeper conversations that can only just make your own personal relationship with each other deeper.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. And I will also say this, that I have focus, and my focus is building a world for my child. And so like from the moment I became a mother, I was like, I want to have a community of people that are supporting my child. So my focus has always been building community. That doesn't mean that I'm romantic with everyone that's in my family circle, but it does mean that like we have deep connections, like our like children are friends with each other, and like we've built community here such that as my child grows up, they're embraced. They're embraced for whoever they choose to be, and they're embraced by a larger group of chosen family.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that's how, how the indigenous do it, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
in community with each other, not necessarily like monogamous, non-monogamous, but just like living in community, supporting each other. And I think that our culture has really gotten away from that, and we do isolate ourselves in these big oversized houses, and we don't live in community. We live like next to each other, but we avoid each other even in the morning as we're getting into our car to go to work, or like
Yeah.
there is this isolation piece. So I can understand like the community piece for sure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what about like, so here's the thought, and I would like to explore it with you. So I I think sometimes like relationships come to a point where maybe they need to end because maybe
Mm-hmm.
you are outgrowing each other, or and I think that the like from my understanding and my exploration in this, like infidelity can come for some people when they don't feel anymore that the relationship is serving them, and it's just more like they're just responding to that instead of going into it and facing it head on and maybe
Mm-hmm.
distracting themselves. So what about like, why does it need to be simultaneous relationships? Like I know you said that not one person can give you everything you need, but I believe that we can give ourselves everything that we need. And yes, it's important to have support and, different types of intimacy with different people. But, does it need to be in a relationship sense?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that one a little bit differently too, and I'm just going to go back to the loss of my child. So when my second son died, that was the hardest experience of my entire life. And in an attachment scenario, I am secure, but I tend to lean anxious when I'm stressed, and my life partner tends to lean avoidant. And so when we had this traumatic situation with the loss of a child, I became incredibly anxious and needed support, and I needed to talk about it a lot, and I needed to work through it. My life partner was avoidant and just chose to close up. And both of us were valid in how we were feeling in that moment. But I went to my nanny at the time, and I was just really distraught. And she said, "Well, that's what your girlfriends are for." And she essentially was saying, "Don't lean on your life partner for everything right now. You are in a traumatic situation and you need to have support from other people." Well, I would argue that's the case now in this environment that I'm talking about. Not everyone needs to be romantic, but it serves for us each to have a social network that we lean on for support for different things in our life. And actually, many men don't have one. Many men don't have a social circle outside of their marriage, and that is actually a detriment to them. There are so many men who struggle with processing emotions and traumas because they don't have more than one person to lean on. And so I would say that I see this as building your own, like creating your own social support structure.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that
Yeah.
for sure. But then
Yeah.
like going back to like the intimacy, or like say actually forming relationships with other people
Mhm.
simultaneously, like is that a necessity? Can you not just have the community piece and without the relationship?
So I cannot. So I can just speak to myself and the 20% of humans who identify along with me, or Americans that choose to identify with me. I cannot. For me, I freedom is a core value of mine. And so freedom to love as I see fit for myself. And I don't wish to be limited in how I communicate and express my love. Now, there are certainly agreements that I have with my life partner around what is and is not comfortable, like what is and is not healthy or safe, right? But outside of that, I want to be able to connect with other humans in the way that feels most authentic to me. And so sometimes that's romantically. Oftentimes it's intimately, but not romantic. Oftentimes it is being able to cuddle freely with another human, to be able to have very deep conversations that typically would only be reserved for my husband, and so that is incredibly important to me. And it's also like it's fairly common for non-Western cultures. So you mentioned the indigenous communities. Many of the indigenous communities are polyamorous because that makes the most sense for them as they are raising their community, raising their families. If we look at most animals are polyamorous in nature, except for penguins. Like most animals are much more free in that. And so, I would almost argue the opposite is like, why do we choose to limit ourselves in how we connect lovingly with others, and could we take a harder look at that, right? About why would you limit that, when it actually our biology and history, if we go back to the apes and the bonobos from which we have evolved are polyamorous, and so there's something about nature in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong with that. Like, I do think that there is something we should start to kind of explore a little bit. And I think, over the last years, I think that people are questioning everything right now in this time, right? Like, this is a
Yeah.
very different time that we're living in where
Mhm.
all things are being questioned. And I think it's not wrong to maybe question, well, why are people not happy in monogamous relationships? And it's not speaking to everybody, but, some people, or like, why are people going outside of the relationship? Like, what is their needs? Um, it's very interesting because I listened to, I'm not sure if you, what's her name? She's a therapist, a relationship therapist. She's very famous. Um, I know her name is escaping me. Anyway, she talks a lot about like healing.
Like Brene Brown or something like that,
It's
or
like she's along those lines.
along those lines. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wish I could remember her name, but I think she's European. She's got this strong accent, but anyway,
Okay.
she's sassy, and she really speaks to like healing relationships after infidelity and things like that. And
Hmm.
I think she's more on the monogamy track, but she has some great points too around what you're talking about in our nature, and
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
like evolution, how we've become. I mean, yeah, I mean, we have to start to question things, and I can appreciate your perspectives and what you're
Yeah.
speaking to for yourself. So thank you for
Yeah.
your openness around that. Um, so I'm
The only thing I would say on that topic too is like pulling politics aside for a moment, but this is a really scary time. Like I am scared. And my safety feels at risk. And so for me, this is a more important time than ever for expanding love, for building community, for finding ways to see each other, even if you don't believe the same things, which is why I'm so grateful that you've had me on your podcast. Like, I think that it's just so important that we find a way to connect as humans. And I'm a believer that at a time like this, abundant love is a really great thing, and like finding ways to love humans like in as many ways as we can. Like I find that to be very healing, in a time where there is so much fear.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think we have been really divided. So,
Mm-hmm.
in whether it's politics or our views on COVID, for example, like I think that
Mm-hmm.
we're just kind of forced to be divided. So, it is
Mm-hmm.
nice to know that if you choose, that you can kind of open yourself up to new perspectives and new ideas and ways of being and living your truth and finding out what that is. Because I know for myself, like for a long time, like I wasn't true to myself, and so as you dissolve the masks and you feel more comfortable to be you in the world where they tell you it's not safe to be yourself.
Yeah.
It's just it can be really healing when you're with others that are also living in their truth. So I really respect
Yeah.
that.
I was in a women's circle a couple of weeks ago, and most of the women that were in the circle were moms, and we were talking about pieces of ourselves that we've missed since we became moms. That we just like lost, and how do we find those pieces? And one of the women shared, I'm so afraid to go back to any version of myself that was before I was a mom because there are repercussions. And that just broke my heart. That like that there are pieces that this woman, and for her it was spinning fire. It was like playing with fire fans was like the thing that she really missed about herself. It had nothing to do with her sexuality, right? But she's like, but I'm afraid to go back to that because there will be repercussions. And I thought, if only I could give you permission to go back and recapture those pieces of yourself that you loved, and remove that fear that you're going to be judged or ridiculed or persecuted for it. Like, couldn't that create just such a safer world for others? So
I think that as people feel more confident just to step forward and to recapture those pieces and call them back in, because that's actually my line of work where I work. I do a lot of retreats. I work with psilocybin.
mhm,
I work in shadow work. Like part of
mhm,
the whole experience of going through a psychedelic experience is actually basically like disarming yourself, because we've been living in
mhm,
walled up ego, and just like going
mhm,
underneath of that and like, who are you? Like, what is important to you? What matters to you? Not what society believes for you is best, or not what your parents thought or governments decide. It's like really
mhm,
what's true to you, because I do think that we are the only beings that are not really in tune with our intuition. We're
mhm.
so afraid of it, where an animal would die if it didn't follow its intuition, on
Yeah,
in the wild. So I think it's important what you're sharing, and also to really remember that, that this conversation is just for to expand your curiosity. Like, maybe the things that you believe, maybe they're not true. Maybe your reality isn't what you think it is, and maybe it's just about getting curious and exploring other alternatives that might be more online for you and might feel more loving and supportive. So, I mean, when you
exactly.
kind of talked about this women's circle, is this in your community specifically? So these are women that are polyamorous?
No, no, the women's circle is
Okay.
so I participate. You mentioned the like the somatic healing and psilocybin. Like, I participate in so many different communities. So I participate like plant medicine. I participate in women's circles just for the sake of women's circles. I participate in tantric dance that has nothing to do with being polyamorous, just because I want to better understand how to follow my own pleasure. So I have so many communities that are not polyamorous. But as I hear like from people in each of these communities, we're all kind of seeking the same thing. We're all seeking our most authentic self. We're all seeking to live a life that's in alignment with our values and our vision for our lives. And so I'm just seeking to normalize a conversation around non-traditional family structures.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And so, how have you found your book being received by those people maybe that had alternative views?
So there's definitely it's divided. There's definitely a population that says, "Oh, thank God." It's interesting because the people who are the most grateful aren't even necessarily polyamorous. In fact, one of them was a therapist who had a child who transitioned at the age of 19 and is trans. And the mother said to me, "I didn't know how to relate to my child for 19 years. I lost 19 years of my child's life because I was trying to force them into bows and dresses when they were wanting to wear t-shirts and jeans." And like, what you're doing right now, Candace, in writing this book is giving parents like me more tools. So, because I didn't have any tools when my child was growing up. And so this is now speaking to a much larger population of non-traditional family. And my mission is to normalize a conversation around non-traditional family. And so that has been so heartening. And then there is a population that is deathly afraid of anything that challenges the traditional family structure. And so, yeah, there are friends who've ended friendships with me. There are people who've said, God is frowning on you, and it's like, could we just appreciate? I'm not trying to push this on you, like, could we just appreciate that there are different ways, to live life, and that all can be okay.
You went through a very difficult time when you had to battle to keep your kid, right? Or you
Yeah.
just have one son?
Well, not keep my kids. I ran an emotional intelligence leadership academy for 4 years and graduated 1,000 adults through that program. And one of my students was in a severe domestic abuse situation, so badly that they had 3 children under the age of 6. Those children were not safe in the home, and so each of the children were given a lawyer. At the time, I had applied for adoption and was going through the adoption process. I already had a social worker interview, all of that. And the 3 lawyers for the children called me and said, could you please fight for custody of these kids? And so I went to court and I fought for custody of these kids. Because of the nature of this domestic violence case, I had a friendship with the couple that was in the domestic violence case. And so they knew about me being in an open marriage, and that was used against me in court. And so while I was sitting on the stand, it was, I was being like just hammered with questions about this. And ultimately, the judge ruled against me, and said, because I was polyamorous. Now, what's awful about the situation is that these children are now in foster care. They're not. They're not with anyone who knows them, who cares about them, who wants to keep them together, who is trauma informed, who was willing to move heaven and earth to ensure that they were given the support that they needed, because I was polyamorous. And so for me, there's like, you can go in 2 directions when something like that happens. You can just say, okay, we're just going to do what the courts say and we're just going to go back to monogamy. Or you can say, that was the wrong call, that there was a systemic mistake here. And I am committed to changing that, because I don't believe that should be a determinant as to whether someone is a good parent or not.
No.
And so I'm like, that was a real turning point for me. And really the motivation for writing this book, it was like, I have to create a bigger conversation here because this policy needs to change.
Wow. Oh, wow. What a powerful story. And like, thank you for wanting to do the right thing with those children. Cause I know like that's a huge undertaking to take on
Hmm.
children that aren't your own. And it
Yeah.
tells that your heart is in the right place. And I'm sorry that you
Mm-hmm.
had to go through that. And that's where we are at, that is a
Mm-hmm.
determining factor to the quality of life that those kids are going to have based on, they probably would have more love, maybe, being
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by more open people who want to express themselves in a different way, right?
I guess one of the things I talk about too in the book is just like parenting. Like, I am a mom first. I have my responsibilities as a mother first, and I have 2 whole chapters on like, how do you navigate all of this as a parent, right? And so I take that responsibility very seriously. My family takes that responsibility very seriously, and if there is ever something that flies in the face of my role as a mother, then that gets to go. And so whether it's my own child or the children that I was fighting for custody for, that's the priority. And so like, whatever is happening, like, even monogamous couples don't talk about their sex life to their children. It's just, that's not your kids don't want to know these things, right? So like, that's not part of this. It is like, okay, we can be a very happy, healthy family, committed to raising our children with all the tools they need to live a healthy life. And it doesn't, like, what we're doing, with our personal lives outside of that, should not have an impact on that piece.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think
Mhm.
what people don't understand, they fear, when it's
Yeah.
out of their
Right.
comfort zone. It's like
Right.
they almost like I think that people want to make you become what they want so that they feel comfortable, right? It's like their insecurity,
Hmm.
their
That's right.
fears. Yeah.
That's
Wow.
right.
What a powerful conversation. What a powerful story and what a powerful mission you're on. So if
Thank
someone
you.
is, maybe curious about potentially opening up their relationship and exploring this, like what advice would you want to give them?
So, first, I'd say read Polyagony, and second, I would say find yourself a poly-informed therapist. First and foremost, make sure that you're setting yourself up with a good foundation, that you understand your why, that you know what your values are as an individual before you ever start thinking about, what you want in a romantic partner. I would then say double down on your existing relationship. Ensure that the existing relationship is one that is not falling apart or like on the fringe already. If that's the case, manage that first. Like, make sure that you're really focused on, what does this relationship need from me, and is it getting what it needs? If you're coming from then a place of groundedness, and you have some solid infrastructure, then it's a matter of, okay, what are our hopes and fears? Starting to talk through that, forming some agreements. Like this is how we're going to start off. We're going to start off just by doing everything together, and like we're going to experiment together. And then the final thing I would say is take baby steps, move very slowly. There is no rush. And I think that's one of the things most couples make a mistake on, is they just rush. There's no rush. And if the slower that you move, and I always talk about the lowest common denominator. If there's two people in a couple and you say, I'm comfortable with this, and somebody else says, I'm comfortable with something much less, start off with what much less. Just start with what both people are comfortable with and go from there. And honestly, that is, I think, what can really strengthen the relationship.
Yeah. No, it makes sense because you want to build on it. You don't want to just jump in and then it becomes, as you call, agony or like,
Yeah.
oh
Well,
yeah,
I mean, starting off in a fractured relationship isn't going to lead to anything that's like solid, right? Like it's going to be fractured all the way through. And so I think those beginning conversations and those beginning stages are the most important.
yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much for this conversation, Candace. I really appreciate
Thing.
you being open and answering these questions that maybe it were like I am challenging some views a little bit, and like I appreciate that. And I know like everybody has their opinion on this, and maybe we
Hmm.
don't know, we don't understand. So it's just great to have like an open conversation and just explore it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being open to different perspectives, and that's what I would say to your listeners as well. Is if I can just offer one invitation, just say, "Oh, interesting. I'm curious," and that can create so much healing.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think you said it earlier around like going into the fear. You know, why,
Hmm.
what is it that scares you about that? Where,
Hmm.
what are you feeling when you think about the possibility of your partner being with someone else?
Hmm.
Why do we feel this need to, feel ownership over someone? And I think that's where maybe monogamy, we just don't even do that right, to be honest. Like, I think that there's a lot of confusion around these things, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's
I agree.
see, So yeah, so I think it's really about like where you're at with yourself. I think that if I could say, like from everything you've shared about this, I think it's really just really first and foremost nurturing that relationship with yourself. And then, you know,
That's right.
and going through that and just getting grounded and okay, do I love myself? Like, am I outsourcing my love, or am I looking for, to be validated or to feel sexy again in another relationship? Because it's always way more fun in the beginning, and then it gets harder as you move on into the relationship. So, is it like, are you escaping that difficulty, or are you, like you said, like going back to your why and like why you're doing this?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And what I would also say is just know that you're not alone. So wherever you are in your journey, there are people out there that want to support and support your process. And whether that's me or a therapist, like I strongly encourage people to like not depend only on themselves as they're grappling with these questions.
yeah, no, that's great advice. And so, with that said, where would someone find you, connect with you?
Yeah, so polyagony.com is where you can learn more about the book. There's also 100 exercises in the book. All of those are available at polyagony.com. And there are a series of workshops and like some free that you can actually attend to learn more and to practice some of these skills. And so all of that's at polyagony.com.
Amazing. And I'm going to link all of that up on the podcast and also links to your book. So if someone wanted to purchase it, they could get a hold of it. So
Great.
thank you so
Th-
much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. And that concludes this episode of Redefining Love. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation and maybe opened up your mind to different ways of relating, different ways of loving. There's so much conversation around this that can be had, all sides of the coin. So if you're enjoying this podcast and specifically this episode, and you know someone that could benefit from listening to it, please send them a link, share this episode, share my podcast. I think that this can only help others to really understand what love is all about, understand love for self and for others. So I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I will catch you next time.